series that we've been going strong since March on staying strong and positive for ourselves and our children. Hi, Stacy. Hi, Emily. Welcome, Christine from Alaska and Morgan from Sheboygan. I know your name even though it says one Wyman. Isn't that good? And hi, Tracy. Welcome back. Hi, Amy from Denver. I see some new names too. Hi, Angela and Rose and Becky and Lawan and Christian and Sarah and Maria and Pamela. And hi, Tammy and Keela and Donisha. I'm seeing some new names as well as some familiar names, which is always very exciting, both to welcome people back and to welcome new people. Hi, Belita. Nice to see you. We've got a number of people registered for today. It's a really going to be a big group. And we're excited about that because I'm here with my colleague, Robyn Harvey from Be Strong Families. And Dee Yin is here too. She's our tech support person, make everything go smoothly. Hi, Ellen. Welcome, Susan, Carla, Barbara. It's great to see you all. I can't actually see you, but I can feel your energy as you come into the room. So it's exciting. Hi, Barbara from Colorado. And Lauren from Cleveland, Texas. Welcome. And we're going to get started because it's now noon. So let's advance to the next slide, Dee, please. Been having some, I don't know whether it's Mercury retrograde or what, but we've been having some technical difficulties. So please bear with us. Today's topic is vicarious trauma, vicarious resilience. And Robyn is Be Strong Families National Director of Training and Technical Assistance. And we have an actual full day training on this topic, but we thought we would give you all a taste of the full day training. And then if you want more, you can sign up for it or request it for your agency. But the topic seems really, really, really important right now because we're all experiencing a lot of trauma, and many of us have experienced a lot of trauma in our past. And it's really important that, and we have people all around us experiencing trauma, and it's really important that trauma we can thrive after adversity, and that we can, our resilience can help us adapt. And that's really what this webinar is all about. So just to remind the people who've been here before, and also to let other people who are new know, we have two ways to engage. One, you're using the chat where you put where you direct it to all panelists and attendees. Not all of you are doing that. Some of you are just have it going to all panelists. So if everybody could just take a check right now and make sure your 2 on the chat is going to all panelists and attendees. The chat's the primary way to interact because the chat allows you to talk to each other. It allows you to answer questions. It allows you to ask questions. And it's for our webinars, it's our main way of interaction. But we also, you can use the raise hand function. And if you raise your hand, the process will be that Dee will unmute you, and then you'll need to unmute yourself, and then you'll be able to speak. So what we are going to also do is whenever Be Strong Families does anything, we have agreements. And this is in recognition that we co-create this safe space together so that all of us can be vulnerable and can learn. Because if you've got your defenses up, it's really hard to learn and grow. It's hard to be open. So our agreements are that we will speak from our own experience using I statements, that will treat other people the way we want to be treated, and that we'll just be here now. And I love it. If you agree to the agreements, put I agree in the chat. And I already see that there's a great momentum for that. So we'll get started. And Robyn, turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you and welcome. This is a topic that is so relevant these days. I was having a chat with Kathy after one of our previous webinars, and I said, we should really talk about trauma because I'm feeling the effects so deeply. And she's like, tell me more about that. And I was talking about how, as I was teaching this vicarious trauma, vicarious resilience, over the web and, looking into people's eyes, I was also feeling their pain. I was feeling not only compassion for myself, but compassion for them, because it was just so telling. We have gone through a heck of a year. COVID, social unrest, political unrest, family members getting sick, us possibly getting sick. There was just so much going on. So she said, I think this is a great webinar thing. So that's how this, came about. We teach vicarious trauma, vicarious resilience a couple times a month for agencies all across America. And really the object of this is to help us become more grounded in awareness of what trauma looks like. Because there's an awful lot of people, including myself, who walk around and just say, well, that's life. Bad things happen. Bad things happen to everybody. Turn on the news, talk to your friends. They happen. But trauma is embedded in those instances and is embedded in those situations. And when we can pick that out and we can look at it with a fine-tooth comb, we can address it. And then we can flip it to vicarious resilience. Once we've identified the trauma, we can then switch our lens and we can look for the flip side of the coin. So what we're going to do today is I'm just going to take snippets out of our 8-hour training. It's a full day. It does include an hour lunch and several breaks. We all know we get Zoom fatigue. We get tired of looking at ourselves in the camera. So we do take a lot of breaks. We're going to do a couple little activities. A lot of it is very much interactive. So I'm going to need your participation. I'm going to need you to raise your hand. Kathy's going to monitor the chat like she always does and read out comments and questions. And let's just explore some of this together. All right, so our first slide is about definitions. Definitions serve to, give us a grounding and a common language. So the first definition is vicarious trauma. That's trauma received from hearing stories and bearing witness to another person's pain, fear, or other negative emotions that those impacted by trauma hold. Am I the only one in the room that has some vicarious trauma? I know there's lots of people on the webinar today that are in the helping professions and that you're being talked to and talked at. And I think it's important that we understand the trauma doesn't just happen to us. We absorb it from other people too, and from interacting with other human beings. Then there's toxic stress. That's the prolonged exposure to stress without sufficient support. Compassion fatigue, the deep emotional and physical toll present when caregivers do not actively practice self-care. Burnout, the physical and emotional exhaustion present due to being overwhelmed and underperforming. And the last one is the trauma stewardship. And trauma stewardship is really just tending to the hardship, the pain, the suffering, the trauma experienced by other living beings, or even the planet ourselves. Is there anything you want to add to that, Kathy? You look like you were going to try to say something. Unmute yourself.
First, I was coughing. That's why I muted myself. But I guess I would say that when we did this, we were thinking that sometimes people burnout, compassion fatigue, toxic stress, vicarious trauma, trauma stewardship are all part of ways, lenses, or angles on what happens when you're around and working with and trying to help a lot of people who've experienced or are experiencing major trauma. And we wanted to kind of just put the definitions out there because they're interrelated, right?
Yeah, thank you for adding that. And I should have added first that not only am I the director of training at Be Strong Families, I'm a mom, I'm a friend, I'm a sister, all kinds of different things. And my interactions are very dynamic. So it doesn't just come, all of these definitions don't just come at you from your profession. They're coming at us as people, as human beings every day. And if you have kids, compassion fatigue is real. We often do a lot of self-care or them care and not self-care. All right, go ahead and forward the slide D, please. All right, so in trauma steward, or in the vicarious trauma, we just upgraded it. So sometimes I slip back into the old statement of trauma stewardship, but in our vicarious trauma program, we talk a lot about what trauma looks like. How do you know that you've been traumatized? What are the signs?
Not how do you know that you've been traumatized, but how do you know that you have trauma exposure, vicarious trauma exposure? How do you
Yes.
know that someone else's trauma is impacting you, right?
Yes. Both. Yes, both. And in this instance, we're going to talk about other people's. So the vicarious nature means that it's coming from other people that you are exposing yourself or helping. Thank you for that distinction, Kathy. So what we did is we took the 6 vitality domains of Be Strong Families, which are physical, social, mental, spiritual, financial, and environmental, and we grouped the known trauma exposure signs. So in the physical arena, there's a cardiopulmonary disease, problems with your heart, weight gain, weight loss, ulcers, stomach issues, diabetes, insomnia, headaches, heartburn, nausea, skin issues, skin breakouts, hives, eczema, sexual dysfunction, and frequent illnesses. Those could all be signs that you've been exposed to some vicarious trauma. Then in the social, there's the trust, conflicts, paranoia, inability to empathize, avoidance, the inability to listen, to pay attention, and minimizing. So just thinking about those first 2, think back in your life in the last 6 or 7 months. And have you experienced any of those? You don't have to self-reveal. You can just think about it in your own life. In our trauma program, in Vicarious Trauma, Vicarious Resilience, we do a inventory. And what we do is we ask you to think back in the last 6 months and to mark how frequently you've experienced one or more of these things in any one of those. So what I'd like you to do is just take a mental inventory while I'm talking and think about the signs of exposure that you've been noticing. The next one is mental. This is where you have some dissociative moments. You may have difficulty concentrating, the inability to embrace complexity. You may feel overwhelmed that you can't do enough. You may experience some grandiosity or some anxiety or worry. In the spiritual vitality, this may be where you feel helpless or hopeless, despair, depression. You may be fearful, feel guilty. You may have diminished creativity, or you may just feel numb. And then financial, this is where addictions lay, substances, shopping, gambling, food, sex. You may have some decreased job performance in this arena. And the last one is environmental. So environmental is not just the outside environment, but really where you live, where you work. This is excessive clutter, hoarding, attachment to things, not cleaning your house, not going out. Not that we can help not going out now, we're all pretty quarantined. That might be traumatic in and of itself. So as you think back in the last 6 or 7 months, how many of you can at least pinpoint one of those? Can you put that in chat if you have at least one of those signs on there? Yeah. A lot of people.
Yeah. Do people have questions about any of them as signs of trauma exposure? Like I was thinking when Robyn was talking about grandiosity as a mental or emotional sign, what that looks like in what does that look like, Robyn, in a caregiver? Like
like you don't go on vacation because you're the only one that can solve the problems.
Over involvement.
It's over involvement. It's not keeping your boundaries or other people's.
Yeah, and like, for example, I was thinking about this. I was really resonating when you're talking the social ones, when you talk about trust issues, not so much trust issues, but just where's the one that says, or maybe it is mental and emotional, but that whole feeling of like, especially if you've got stuff going on, and then so many people in your world have so much going on. Like there just is a point where you can't hear it anymore, or you can't, or you need to turn it off, or you just um you I guess I'm with the spiritual numbness or the inability to empathize, like where you just go to a place where I can't take it in, I can't listen to any more.
Yeah.
I can't. And it's like, people saying the minimizing is like, and I know people who do this also, is like, this person's having this happening. How can you be upset about that? Like you're upset because there aren't any cookies in the house, and so's dealing with, the loss of a job or the loss of a family member.
Yeah, there's a few that I really have been noticing in my life. Minimizing is one of them. And it comes out as really snarky in my personality. So my kids will say a complaint. I'll be like, well, my friend just had 11 people die in her family. Like, your problems are nothing. You know,
Right. So Andrew says, I have multiple and they were in place even before the pandemic.
mhm.
Oh, Dee's telling us we have a hand from Ellen. Um, Many people have multiple and they can be so hard to recognize or push to the side. Elda says fear, like fear is one for her, the fear of getting sick.
Mhm.
Um, and over functioning. Yep. That's the grandiosity piece, like and running yourself ragged.
Yep.
Um, Doreen says, I have several from this list, and under the blanket of COVID, my social trauma is continuing to take blows from isolation. And Tammy says, that resonates with me, Kathy. I stopped watching the news years ago, but I can't stop listening to clients. It does pile up if you don't actively work on self-care. And I
Yeah,
guess
Maria.
Maria says, compassion fatigue, being a mom, working, pastor's wife, and army chaplain, it's hard. I feel like I'm all over the place and I get stressed and have some anxiety issues, being there for everyone, and I forget to be there for self-care for me. And the compassion fatigue, we're looking at it as a sign of trauma exposure, is like just when you just get overwhelmed by other people's trauma, and coupled with your own. And then because the question is, it's not only about self-care, and that's what was one of the insights for us when we were creating this training, is a lot of times with compassion fatigue, it's like the answer is you take care of yourself, but the fact is there isn't enough self-care to be able to neutralize what's going on right now. So it's not like, you didn't take enough baths, or you didn't have your, like bubble baths, or you didn't get, your me time. It's like in the moment, how do you release, or that's what we were interested in, is what are strategies
Mhm.
besides self-care that you can use to be able to deal with vicarious trauma, right, Robyn?
That's absolutely correct. And I want to get to Ellen and her raised hand before we move on. So Ellen, can you unmute, or Dee, can you unmute Ellen?
Ellen is unmuted and you need to accept it on your end as well.
Ellen, you need to unmute yourself, because we've unmuted you. And that is usually at the far bottom left corner, at least on my Zoom, it's at the bottom left corner. If there's a line through that microphone, it means you're muted. So you need to press that button. Okay, well, we will.
All right, and there's another comment from Barbara. She says the antidote is gratitude, empathy, healthy support system, and fun and play. I believe those all help, Barbara.
Yeah, they do. And the thing is that what happens when, what we're talking about today is what happens when you, as a normally empathic person, your empathy goes to zero. Like, how do you understand that that happened, and what do you do about it? So.
All right, Dee, you can go to the next slide. All right. So I want you to think about what's going on. Like when I read those out and you were picking them out, which ones you were experiencing, look at the vitality domain and think about how that's being impacted by other people's trauma. And let's have just a couple minutes of conversation or chat here about what we can do to build it up. So we've already started this conversation. We had some gratitude and some play. What are some tangible things? I'm simply overwhelmed by the daily trauma of work, but also the ongoing national trauma. Yes, Julia, me too.
So you want to go back to the vitality domain? So
yeah, go ahead. Dee, can you go back to one slide? Or one slide back. Sorry, I said that clunky.
So if you, I mean, I think what Robyn's saying is if you are, which one of these domains is the most impacted for you, right? And then what can you do to build that domain back up?
And I can go as an example. So I'm taking a hit in the spiritual domain. I'm feeling almost a despair about just the sheer volume of stuff that's going on, the COVID, the political unrest, the social unrest, all of that. It really was starting to get to me. And I really could tell that in my creativity. And other people were starting to point out that my creativity was being diminished. Like, this should have been a really easy, fun, creative project for you, Robyn, and you're flopping. And then I had to think, like, well, why is that? And I went back into my material and thought, yeah, I'm showing signs of trauma exposure in the spiritual domain for sure. So some of the things that I'm doing is, no matter what the weather, I'm spending some time outside in the sunlight if there's sunlight. I have to be outside. Something about nature really inspires me creatively. And talking with my animals. I'm a chicken mama. I have got 2 dogs, 4 cats. I love to feed the wild birds. All of those things and being with nature and the creatures is relaxing to me. It sets my trouble meter down. If I could lay outside all day for a couple of days, I would be good. So I think that's like saying I need some vacation time on a beach, right? Maybe. The other one that is social, and I said that I tend to minimize, especially with my kids, who I think live in the lap of luxury. They live at home, I pay their bills, I feed them, I clothe them, I take care of them, all of that. And their complaining makes me snarky, like, hey, your problems are nothing. But then when I sit back and I think about it, my sons are out of work. They've all been laid off. They're living at home for a reason. This isn't fun for them. They're young adults. They want to have a life. So I had to do some social things. Our work, Be Strong Families, we have happy hour. It's not always extremely well attended, but I'm typically there because I love my work friends and it's a great outlet. And we play games together after hours and, we just hold each other up. That was one of my social outlets. Another social outlet is I'm doing some FaceTime with my sister. The phone thing isn't cutting it anymore. We used to get together every other week, for a walk or whatever, touch base. So doing some things that are more than a pedicure and a bubble bath or a massage, some things that really are a pointed elixir for my trouble.
Nice. I like that word, elixir. Morgan says, my mental emotional has been most affected. I would like to start reading, journaling, continue utilizing resources, and lean on my supports more. I'd really like to start and commit to a strict self-care routine daily in the morning before I start work to be more calm and relaxed to start my day.
That's awesome.
Others? I mean, other people resonating with which domain is getting you? And what are some things what are some elixirs for that domain? I guess I would say that I was listening to you, Robyn, and I was feeling spiritual, mental, emotional, social, all of those. And I think even environmental, like the not going out piece. And I've just been very allowing myself to sleep because I think it manifests in tiredness.
Mhm.
And so not just allowing myself to, after work, go to bed early, like whatever time it is. If it's 7 o'clock, I don't really care. And then when I get up early, I meditate like at 4 in the morning or 4:30 or whatever when it's quiet. I have like a half an hour or 45 minutes of just meditation, which when I'm able to do my meditation practice, it affects all of the domains.
Yeah.
So Tammy says, I find the mental emotional domain is affected. I have days when the anxiety is overwhelming. I can't focus. I get overly tired and I need to sleep. I do what I can to avoid getting to that point, but if I get there, I need to sleep. Usually I'll wake up with more clarity and ability to face another day. If I can't cut the day short, I try to use some breathing techniques and tapping. Well, thank you, Tammy.
Yeah, that's
Um,
great.
Christine says she recently found a great magazine about mindfulness. And Gina says, being home for so long, I've tended to do too much online shopping as a coping strategy. This year, I decided to set some limits and made an agreement with myself to put items in a cart for 5 days before buying to make sure it's something I really want to do. More often than not, I delete the items.
Gina, that really resonates me. On Saturday, I went to Hobby Lobby and filled my whole cart. And then you know what I did? I put it all back. And I came home and told my husband, I had like $300 worth of stuff in my cart. He's like, well, where is it? I'm like, it's still at the store. I'm so excited. Because I find, and we talk about this in the workshop, how these are all very interrelated. So my shopping addiction also has caused me to kind of have a cluttery house. I have too much stuff. So you know how that, and also it harms my relationship with my husband, who asks me not to spend any money at Hobby Lobby. Is there anybody else?
Who else wants to share? Which domain is impacting you, and what could you do about it?
All right. You know, without further ado, let's move on to the next slide because it's a really exciting slide and kind of a concept that, go one more, D. It's a concept that I had not given much thought to until, you know, Kathy brought this up and said, this is something that we should be talking about. Vicarious resilience. So if we can absorb trauma from other people and it can affect our wellness, we can also absorb resilience. So vicarious resilience is learning from the trauma survivors about how to overcome adversity, resulting in positive transformation, increased empowerment, and enhanced empathy. What do you guys think of that?
This concept, what do you think of this concept? Because lots of times we think of, you know, like when we were talking about it before, we were talking about like other people's problems adding to our problems and creating an overload. And I think a lot of times we think of that. We think of other people's problems adding to our load. But there's also a way in which other people's ability to handle their problems and other people's coping skills and other people's ability to help others even when they've been so impacted can be really truly inspiring.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
we have some people talking about it.
yeah.
Love it. Good news. So true. I
Yeah,
love it.
I love it. It keeps a strength-based mindset. Tracy says,
Absolutely.
"I'm a family advocate. I really find myself doing this." And Susan said, yes, I love to read novels and true stories about people who are overcomers. Yes, the overcomers. And I
Yeah.
kind of like, it's the opposite of minimizing in a way. It like it puts your stuff in perspective sometimes. Or it's like, at least if they can do it, I can do it, you know, gives you inspiration. Julie says, provides us with tools to overcome or identify issues to overcome in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy says, Robyn, when you first mentioned this at another webinar, I thought I had never heard of it. After thinking about it, I may not have heard the term, but the concept is something that I use regularly in my work, not just me learning from others, but from sharing my own experiences and resilience. We're able to move forward together with more hope. And Luan says, yes, even in our personal lives, to encourage consumers.
All right, anybody else have thoughts on vicarious resilience? Anybody have any examples about when you have witnessed in the last couple months beauty from pain or beauty from trauma, or?
And this might be somebody raising their hand and telling us an experience. I mean, Barbara, maybe you would want to do that because I'm a therapist. Vicarious resilience is why I've been able to stay in my profession. So
Barbara, do you want to say more about that?
Tell a story. Raise your hand. Julia says people have been able to take time to heal through the 2020 downtime. It would be great if somebody would raise their hand and just give us some example of this. Barbara is going to talk. Yay. You're unmuted, Barbara. You can unmute yourself now. Yes.
I think for me is I was born and raised overseas and in a country that was next door to another country who was experiencing genocide. And that was in early childhood, and various people who know me were asking me tons and tons of questions of why am I hyper vigilant about watching the news, paying attention to what's going on around me and what's happening. And I said, because I learned from that and I am able to take from that the sort of strengths and the ability of people to thrive and be able to rise beyond that adversity. And I learned that from my grandfather, who was involved in war and military service. And so he was able to teach me things about, this is how you take care of yourself. These are the things you do. These are the things you don't do. That type of thing. And after moving to the States, it was incredibly valuable to have learned those things. And even though there are times where I get overwhelmed by the news or whatever is going on in the media or my immediate environment, when I'm able to take time to take a step back and be alone and go back to sort of the history of my story, I begin to access that vicarious resilience, the ability to kind of look back and go, oh, yeah, I remember. One of my mentors passed away this summer, and he was the first one who taught me through his relationship with a person who became his wife, because although she was a single mom caring for a 5-year-old, she was a triple black belt in martial arts. And I was like, interesting. And so I learned a lot from both of them in terms of how to focus my energies on the positive, to focus my energies on what I can do rather than what the barriers are.
Thank you, Barbara. Amy says, I work primarily with children of color, and seeing how they have navigated the pandemic and racism is something I'm constantly amazed by. Trauma is still there and ongoing, but they also have grit and determination. Julia says one of her clients reminded her of that yesterday. And Julia says, I have clients who are suffering at this time, but they share with me how they share the resources we forward to them. One of my clients is sharing her food stamp benefits with her neighbors so that both families are able to eat.
Anybody else?
We have a hand from Robyn. Robyn Grant, you're unmuted. You can now talk. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. Yeah, I think that the vicarious resilience, it's a great concept, and it works. And I think a lot with what's going on with all of us now, that there's so much stuff that's going on that we've never experienced or known anybody else to experience. It's all so new. Everything that we're dealing with in the last 9-10 months, it's just new. Now, obviously, we can take ways of coping, healing, dealing, and all of that from other trauma experiences and apply it. And that's great. We can do that. But I think I do that, and I try to share and encourage that with my clients to help them get through each day. But I think one of the biggest problems for me is that it's just never ending. It's just trauma. The news, what's going on, there's just no end in sight. It's daunting. Obviously it's going to end, but this has really been a long, enduring, painful experience for us, and something that, I think will really go down, and that people really had a hard time dealing with it. And then I think the other part that troubles me so much is that there are so many groups that are so not affected by everything that's going on. And then there are other places that are they're just dying in the streets. They're the hospital. It's just so different. I know that Barbara talked about genocide. This is not compared to that, but that again would be something that's, we deal with deaths in the family. We deal with loss of jobs. We deal with bad relationships. We deal with all those kind of things. But things like this, it just really takes a lot. It really does take a village sometimes to get through, I think, what we're all getting through. And then unfortunately, every time you turn on the news, which we have to, because, you need to stay informed, then it's something else. And as soon as we start to feel better and make ourselves feel better, and then it's something else happening. So anyway, I'm done. I could go on and on. It's just that, and so I'm glad we have this little chat.
I appreciate the perspective, Robyn, and I think it's really interesting to juxtapose it with Julia's comment in the chat, which she says, as a person of color, I reflect on the history of the African American experience to remind myself that I come from a people who under great hardship have survived. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I was thinking about, as you were saying, this is so new, this degree of suffering is so new, is that I don't think it's so new for everybody. Certain aspects of it are, but I think that's one of the things that's come out of this whole last year is an awareness of the incredible, and you referred to it too, Robyn, the inequities that are in our society, and the amount of persistent, unrelenting trauma that people of color experience because of the way that
right. It's not the concept of suffering and suffrage is not new, but it is to a lot of our people in this generation today, mm-hmm. Who are not even familiar with or don't look to the past and our history. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of suffering, yes, but this generation right now, yeah.
Role models, and we have another hand from Catherine. So, and what was just discussed is how many people of color live daily. Yeah, that's what Julia, if you'd like to speak to that also, it'd be great if you'd raise your hand. But Catherine, right now you're permitted to talk, and you need to unmute yourself in order to do so. You're unmuted, so go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I think something that kind of struck me when Robyn was speaking just now, about kind of like the, from her perspective, it feels like a lot of new and unexperienced trauma. I'm a white 23-year-old female living in Texas. And so I just feel like that's important to say. I feel like I've, maybe have been in that mindset, especially back in June, when America was struck, with the death of George Floyd. And there was a lot of, social unrest that came to the surface, but it's been there. And I think to kind of reframe it to the vicarious resilience we can, and I can't see the comment that was made by whoever brought up about the social injustice when it came to like racism and stuff, but I think to kind of reframe it for the vicarious resilience, we can, appreciate that there's this group of people that we've, all been living beside. And, in the last 100 years, they have overcome so much. And I think as, helping professionals and people in general, it's really important to think about that and kind of keep it in our frame of mind, that we can, be excited about that and kind of push to continue the change and have this vicarious resilience, as they've overcome trauma from the prejudices and things that they've experienced over time, if that makes sense. I feel like I was kind of rambling a little bit, but that's just kind of what I was thinking, that we can take the vicarious resilience from these other groups of people that experience discrimination and hopefully move forward.
Thank you, Catherine.
So yeah.
Julia, your hand is raised. You can talk. You have to unmute yourself though. We've unmuted you. Yeah, there you go.
Hello. I guess one of the things that in just listening to the comments, is that I think when it comes to vicarious resilience, even if it's a new phenomenon for some people, it is a good thing to reflect on what's on the role models and those of others who have been through things. I think one of the things as a person of color, listening to my coworkers who are not people of color and understanding the trauma that they've experienced with all that they've seen, is having an opportunity to kind of explain to them that this is what we've been going through as a person of color for centuries, and allowing that aha moment or that a different level of understanding for that impact, and kind of trying to be there for them when it really settles in. Because I think sometimes for people who are not of color, it doesn't, the vicarious trauma and the trauma that we face on a daily basis, it's not something that's easily understood. And, or to, when people say it can't be that bad, when people have to face it, that yes, it really is that bad, I think just being able to be that person to listen to them and to say, but we can make a difference or change how the narrative is from this point forward is an impactful thing. But I think just allowing sometimes our brain to really accept and realize that for several groups of people, just not African Americans, this is an everyday life occurrence. And so I don't know, I just think that as a person of color, especially as a professional social worker, this year has been very different for me, because I'm having to have conversations with my clients about things that, as one of the other person said, that they've never experienced, and to give them tools that I've used as a professional throughout my life in order for them to continue to grow and develop. But it's just been a different year, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Julia. Christian says, yes, I agree as an African-American woman. And Tammy says, well said, Julia, thank you. And Amy, thank you for sharing. Tammy also says in the chat, with it being one thing after another, I'm so grateful for vicarious resilience. I don't want to imagine a world where we are all hopeless at the same time.
Yeah, Tammy, that really reminds me. I saw a little cartoon on my Facebook the other day, and a little man was peeking out of his blinds, and there was lava flowing towards his house, and he was like, what's next? That was kind of the foreboding feeling I was in when I was feeling so spiritually depleted for a while. Like, okay, what's next?
So Barbara, I know we need to get moving. Do we have time for one more comment?
Yeah, we certainly do.
Barbara, you're permitted. We've unmuted you. So yeah.
I just want to respond to Julia as well as some other folks who have talked about being a person of color. Um, I know you all can't see me, but people who do see me are very surprised about my age, my cultural identity, my ethnic identity, and all kinds of things because I do not appear to be my age, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing that I will just say is there are times where we, as people of color, need to know when to just stop telling our stories because the person who we may be talking to, there may be a block or some sort of inability to understand and grasp what is going on. And at times, the cost to ourselves to explain ourselves, to help them understand, can be too much. And I have experienced that and have learned to set boundaries for myself to protect myself when I encounter people who just don't get it. And despite every effort to illustrate or help them understand, there's just a rational reasoning, whatever block there. And when I encounter that, I have learned to just stop and walk away because the cost to me to continually have to defend and learn and teach sometimes is too great. And I have to just walk away from the conversation and tell them to go look elsewhere to find the information because I don't have the energy to explain it.
So there's a great webinar for anybody who wants to think more about that. Or Carol Mizuguchi was here. She'll be here this Friday too, but she was here last Friday and did a webinar on allyship. And she talked a lot about whose responsibility it is to educate and how it can't be on people of color responsibility to educate white people or people who don't understand that it's exhausting and it's not the battle. And then it's really about allies, like what does it really mean to be an ally and how do you make that a way of life? And so I would encourage anybody to like check that out on our website or on our YouTube channel because there was a lot of really good information about that topic.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Google and they should do the work. Yeah. And sometimes people, and she also talked about people like who say they want to be educated, but then they really are resisting the education. They don't really want to understand. They want to argue with you. And I've experienced that even, I was at one point in my life, I was a observant Jew, and meaning I was observing the Sabbath. I was observing all of the Jewish laws. I'm not observing all those laws anymore, but I was. And having to explain that to people who didn't understand and having them make assumptions about, who I was and, as a woman, as a feminist, like nobody got it. And it was just not worth explaining. It wasn't a good conversation to have because so I guess I had some empathy for that situation. And Carol also did point out how, there are other parameters where privilege plays out besides race and ethnicity. So that can be gender, it can be religion, and all of us can be aware of when we have privilege in a group. So that she was talking about, she's an African-American woman, and she was talking about how she's a Christian. And so if at a prayer breakfast or at a breakfast, she has a Muslim sister there, that she is in a position of power or a position of privilege vis-a-vis in that context and needs to be a good ally. So anyway.
And Dee put the link for that webinar in the chat for anybody who's interested in listening to it if you missed it. All right. Thank you. That was really a great conversation. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to skip a couple of slides, I think. There we go. Thanks, Dee. All right, so in the moment, during our Vicarious Trauma, Vicarious Resilience workshop, we talk about what to do when we are flooded in the moment. So we can maintain a certain decorum, professionalism, we can maintain our relationships, not burn bridges, not use that catabolic energy, against ourselves. So let's just throw a couple ideas out there. It's 12:49, so about 2 or 3 minutes of ideas of what you all do in the moment when you know that you're adrenaline flooding because you feel that trauma trigger. Kathy, what do you do?
What do I do in the moment? I'm a yogi, so I understand about breath. So I go to my breath, and I know that the mind follows the breath. So I go inward, and I try to and I decelerate my breath. I breathe slower. That's one concrete thing I do in the moment.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that too, because I've been Kathy's student for 10 years. That's what I do too. I take a nice deep cleansing breath and hold it, and then exhale it as slow and steady as possible. Stacy has a comment here. She thinks before she speaks. She pauses and breathes. Anybody else?
Another thing you can do is and this Catherine's getting this, stand up from my chair, maybe walk into the next room before coming back to the work or the moment. And, like your large muscle groups, like if you get triggered, like doing this or with your legs, it really helps because it gets the adrenaline out of the body. And Taylor says she walks away, or he or she or they, I don't know. Taylor's is not a one gender name. I walk away to get my emotions under control, and then I usually nap to get my energy up. And Tammy says that's what I try to do as well, especially if I can't walk away, to give myself a few minutes. And I think I just want to give everybody the permission, and we said this in the, is like you can always have to go to the bathroom. Like, I'm sorry, I know this moment is really intense and tough, but I mean, I guess I just say I'm a woman of a certain age and I have to take a bio break right now. And you can always leave. You can, but we often don't feel like we can. So Loan says she reads affirmations, and Carla says I use self-talk to remind myself of harms that I've caused in the past that have impacted my ability to maintain healthy relations. And next I say, God help. And Tammy says, even that is hard when on a one-on-one call with a client. I get it. I get that. There's also somebody, a teacher I know in California, introduced me to a practice that I had been actually doing for many years without calling it that. And she called it the surrender mantra. So she talks about how you're calling on sages and, wise ancestors or God or Jesus or who, whatever extra natural spiritual masters that you I don't want to say believe in, but that you access, and you say, speak through me, breathe through me, talk through me, think through me, and that kind of makes you into an open channel. So that's a way of like a shorthand for getting your ego out of the way, but just like calling on, the divinity and ancestors to move through you.
Yeah. And did you see Barbara's here? Barbara's has got a concept that I love. Joy triggers. Trauma triggers, when activated, can be addressed with joy triggers. Music, prayer, affirmation, scenes, sounds, radical acceptance. Joy triggers, that's going to be my word for the day. Anybody else have a tried and true method? Underneath the desk, if I'm in a meeting, I'll clench my fist really, my muscles, I'll tighten them and then relax my muscles. That works for me. When I'm on Zoom, I may have to turn off my camera so I can, just compose myself again. Stepping back, and really being, having a lot of compassion for myself, knowing that I'm not just worker Robyn, I'm human Robyn, and that all of this is coming at me just like it's coming at everybody else. And that everybody else in the meeting also might need to take a deep breath. Awesome. Okay, go ahead, Dee. You can forward the slide. All right, so I just, we talked a lot about the domains of vitality, but I put this slide back in here just as a reminder that during our Vicarious Trauma workshop, we do a lot of planning, and you walk away with a wellness plan, what you're committing to work on to combat the vicarious trauma of it and come out on the other side. So you can go to the next slide, Dee. And you can skip that one because we've talked that one out. All right, Kathy, here you are with our webinars.
Well, so that's a little taste of vicarious trauma, vicarious resilience. The full training is much more experiential and very deep and really helpful for groups. But I'll just tell you the rest of the week, we have tomorrow, Alexandra and I are holding space for a conversation on survivor's guilt and thriving during the pandemic. So in this webinar, we were talking some about how the pandemic is affecting people disproportionately. So if you're someone who's actually doing really, really well, like what are the emotions around that? Or if your experience is a mixed bag of some things are like way better than they ever have been, and some things are tough. So tomorrow, we're going to be talking about survivor's guilt and thriving during the pandemic. And then on Thursday, Ebony Torres will be here. She's doing part 1 of prevention of cancer and chronic conditions during challenging time. And then Carol Mizuguchi will be back on Friday. And this is really important for everybody who works in an organization somehow. This is an equity audit that organizations can use to advance racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so even if you're not the decision maker at your organization, it's good to know about these things. And when they're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, you know, you can have tools that you can suggest. So she's going to walk us through that on Friday. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Remind everyone about masks. Go to the next slide, Dee, please. Amplify, yeah, amplify. Let's go to the next slide. We don't have much time left. Maybe we'll come back to that. I love this picture. It's of our staff person, Andrew. Those of you who come to webinars often, you've met Andrew, and that's his wife, Michelle. She's an ICU nurse, and they're wearing the Be Strong Families masks. They're so cute and comfortable. Get one from our website today. And then I guess coming out of this webinar, the question is, what would you like to amplify? What do you think we could amplify to create a more perfect union coming out of this webinar today? Previous slide, Dee. And we're going to love, yes, hashtag amplify love. What else? I was hearing a lot of empathy, hashtag amplify empathy. I was hearing a lot of hashtag amplify self-care. What else do we need to amplify?
I like that one, amplify hanging in there.
Yes, hanging in there. That's awesome. Okay. Be sure to fill out the poll before you leave. And thank you for being here. Thank you for coming back sometime in the future, maybe tomorrow. And if you are anybody that if you have a topic for a webinar that you would like to see us do, or if you would like to co-present a webinar, or if you would like, anybody who would do a great one, just email me and we'll talk about it. And for now, this is what we have. Thank you, Robyn. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. I am
not be okay. Thank you.
I'm putting it in the Oh, and I just spelled, because I was trying to type so fast before we left. Hey, everybody, if you're interested in bringing this to your agency, hit me up. Email me, Robyn, ROBYN, at bestrongfamilies.net, or you can get to me through Kathy. We have lots of different opportunities for you.
Thank you. Yes, and Denisha, there are certificates available. You need to email. Dee will put in the chat who you should email. We will send certificates to people who need them, and there are also, the webinar is available, will be available on our website and our YouTube channel to share with other people or to watch it again yourself. Email covid19@bestrongfamilies.net for certificates. Thank you, Taylor, for coming. And we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe.